Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to an Inavate discussion panel. Today we're going to be talking about integration, its future, and what the business of integration might look like in 2025. I've got two of Australia's best integrators on stage here with me, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Tim Arrell from Rutledge AV, Diversified Company, and I'm Head of Engineering in Victoria.
Hi guys, my name's Ben Daffy. I'm one of the founding partners of Unified AV here in Victoria, which is now Pro AV Solutions Victoria.
We're going to start off with an open-ended question. Where do you guys see your business in 2025, which is just 5 years down the road?
Look, I think certainly there's been a huge amount of change in recent years. I think it's, a lot of what's driving it is probably around UC and the way UC is affecting the integration with AV, and also more and more software-based systems. I think we're seeing a change in skill set, and I think we're seeing a large move towards IT and software-based solutions.
Yeah, great points. I think for us there's certainly similar sort of trends that we're experiencing in the corporate space. We're well down the path of convergence now. A lot of maturity in that area compared to where we were 5 years ago. For us, I think one of the big trends over the next 5 years will be the globalisation of a lot of our industry, certainly which you guys have seen recently, and ourselves through our membership of the Global Presence Alliance. We're seeing a huge uptick in the amount of global standardisation and delivery that we're doing across the board.
Globalization is definitely one of the biggest factors that's changing our business, and one of the things that end users are really looking at is providing a consistent experience across borders, across regions, and that's seen the rise of what's being termed as global standards. They want to standardize the equipment that they're deploying in meeting rooms, be it in Tokyo, New York, Seoul, Singapore, or Melbourne. How's that impacting your business? How are these global standards and their emergence changing your business and how you interact with your clients?
Look, for us it's been a fantastic opportunity. You really get to benefit from a huge amount of R&D and then also the data that comes out of that as well. So once you're actually standardising on solutions that are being delivered at serious scale here, and we've got customers that are doing meeting rooms at the tens of thousands of range, you really can then pull some substantial data out of that informs future decisions on utilisation and planning across those organisations and the industry in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think probably one of the other big things when we talk about standardisation is that there's probably two sides to that. So, we've got our normal international type standards, which, people always talk about interoperability between, different systems and how they work. But I think the biggest impact on global standardisation has been around UC-VC type systems and collaboration. And when you look at what people like Cisco and Microsoft, for example, are doing, that's basically changed the AV landscape.
I think now that these guys are really getting a hold of user experience, and at the end of the day you walk into a meeting room and whether you've got Crestron Flex or Logitech Tap there, that button that you press is the same and you're still into your meeting in 2 or 3 seconds.
Yeah.
And I think that's the critical part. It's not so much about the tools that deliver the AV, so to speak. It's about the experience, and that's really starting to improve now.
Yeah, and that's what we see now is that people don't, some people still want a customised solution. Some people still want that niche sort of AV system, but most people want, that, as you say, a familiar user experience, which is the same across all their devices, across all their offices, whichever city in the world they're in, and they want that as a holistic system that, regardless of whether it's their, mobile phone, meeting room touch panel, a booking panel, their traditional PC or laptop, it looks and feels and works basically in the same way.
that's very much the benchmark now, right? It's your personal device. You need to be able to pick it up and use it without a user guide. The A4 laminate on the table anymore, it just doesn't cut it. If you need that, you've failed. And I think customers are now becoming more aware that there are benefits to rationalisation of their AV systems. You don't need to give people 3 Blu-ray players and 8 different HDMI points in a room. Inevitably, what happens is that sort of over-inclusion of features actually just increases the barriers to adoption. So we're finding that simplification in most spaces and really defining intent for each space and not having these, general spaces that are all bells and whistles and do everything. It's about, okay, well, this space is for just doing video meetings of this type, and then you can really define a very well quantified user experience around that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
as integrators, we're very good at the hardware side, the nuts and bolts side, the function side, right? We can get technology to do what the client wants. But like you both of you mentioned, it's all about the experience now. How are you bringing in that UX expertise to your businesses so that you can evolve with your customers, and rather than just, I'm going to come here, I'm going to deploy some products, provide you a system, shift truly to providing a solution, truly to providing a user experience?
Yeah, I think certainly the software development side has changed significantly. A lot of that's driven much more around that IT web-based type software development as opposed to very specific AV type development that was more traditional, and also more out-of-the-box solutions. Things like Logitech and Crestron with their systems that are designed to largely work out of the box and be easy to deploy. And I think more and more, we have dedicated UC and IT teams who are there to roll out systems in very much in line with the IT projects teams, as opposed to a very separated sort of AV system that's bolted together. And we're very focused on the idea that it needs to be a system that the company, the customer's already familiar with, and it's systems that they're using anyway. So that user experience is already familiar.
I think the other dimension for us there is really about that planning phase and starting to take a similar approach to what you've seen from, web agencies and digital agencies in that regard. So spending the time and building your personas and going through a proper UX process with the customer to plan out that journey and how that's going to result in behaviour that they expect when they walk into the room. Because I think, one of the areas that the industry in general has failed over the years is to deliver an outcome which is in line with the expectation of the customer. Is they might understand they're getting a projector and a screen, but they won't necessarily understand how it's going to work until they walk into the room. So by really clearly mapping that out, we're doing a lot more POCs these days before we actually go live. And again, it's such a substantial investment for most organisations. It's mission critical to what they're doing. So we really need to make sure that they understand what they're getting and they're fully aware of that from day one.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we've seen on major projects where there's a lot of that development happening is there's a real focus on using things like Agile and these sort of software development systems that have been traditionally used in IT and web-based software, more traditional software development, so that there's that regular engagement, so that the customer is there all the way, having a input into that process all the way through.
Yeah, now that we're sort of doing those bigger spaces still, that custom programming, giving them a chance to wireframe, put it in front of the customer and actually work through that in real time as the project comes to life, that's where we see the best outcomes for sure.
We can agree that there are some hardware components that are never going to become obsolete. Things like cameras, speakers, microphones, we will always need them for capture. But primarily, and if we look at the IT enterprise world, everything's moving towards software as a service. What does AV as a service look like in your opinion? Because a lot of integrators I've been talking to, a lot of AV professionals, that's their main thrust now. They want to evolve their businesses away from competing on selling boxes and moving towards providing a service, and that means software.
Sure. Look, it's something that I think as integrators, we've all looked at over the years and looked at SaaS and the way that IT companies deliver their products and solutions. And I'm sure everyone wants a bit of that. It's a great model for everyone, really. And it's about how you share risk with the client as well as the reward. So, we're starting to light up some projects now as a service, and that's been fantastic. We've got a big government project in Queensland where we've done a whole building essentially as a service, and then we're now exploring in conjunction with the GPA, taking that to the next step and looking at basically a consumption-based model where customers have the opportunity for paying for utilisation. So if the rooms don't work, if they're not available, if that user experience isn't spot on and people aren't using it, the customer doesn't pay.
Yeah, I think we've seen that this has been coming for a while. Obviously, software as a service is already heavily driven by some of those companies I already mentioned, like Microsoft and Cisco and people like that. There's a very, especially with customers where it's heavily IT driven, they want systems based on software as a system and that type of financial model. I think we probably started to go into that maybe 5 years ago, and it's slowly been getting more and more common. I think that there's some challenges around that. There's certainly, aspects of it where people are very interested in having, a service-based model, and sometimes even it's a mixture of services and also hardware procurement. So, there's ongoing challenges, and I think, there's still some way to go to work out which way people want this stuff to work. And I think it will vary depending on the customer because, some people just want it as that room-based type. We want to pay a certain amount of money per year, per room, per system. Whereas other customers are breaking it down a bit more and saying, well, we want this part as a service. We want, we want equipment on a 5-year or a 10-year lease. We want to pay, hourly rates for labour. There's all different ways that people are looking at doing this, and I think it's a big challenge for our industry, and it's certainly not going away, and I think it's something that it's going to continue to develop significantly over the coming probably 5 years.
Yeah, I think it's just another aspect of maturity as we go from that scenario of dealing primarily with facilities and construction in the past to now primarily engaging via the IT channel across our customer organisations. That's how they think, that's what they understand, so there'll be more of an appetite for that. But on the same side, you still have all of these major capital projects and SIs getting pulled into construction contracts, and that's not something that makes sense to a builder. So
absolutely,
it's going to take time for that model to change to some degree.
And from AV as a service, let's jump onto data, which is a very interesting topic personally because I feel that we have access to a lot of data as AV professionals, but it's splintered so badly, the building management systems and everything else, and everything needs to come together, and we need to have that one window so that we can extract all this data in a meaningful manner and do something meaningful with it. How do you think we move from where we are now to a point where every integrator can start monetizing data that they have access to?
I think it's a big question because it heavily depends on which systems you're talking about. And it also depends on how much integration the client's comfortable with between AV, IT and other software-based systems. But now most AV systems have really developed a long way in regards to having more open APIs, being able to, already having a lot of data management systems that they can offer, but also tying into third party and even going as far as AI, which is, one of those interesting areas. Not sure, where that's going to go, but certainly there's already some capability there. The real challenge, I think, is working with the customer to work out what it is that they want to do with that information. It's useful to us from a serviceability point of view and from a support point of view, but more so it's really interesting to the customer in regards to utilisation, return on investment and all of those sorts of things. I think that's a huge growth area, and it's, again, got a long way to go, I would So
as an industry, we're still just kind of getting our head around data, right? There's actually so much out there that's available to us, just from basic utilisation right through to, you know, some of the new technology that we're putting in pre-move or pre-relocation for customers that actually heat maps their floors. Where are people going? How are they interacting? Where are they actually moving about in the physical space? So you're starting to really define that sort of process when we intersect the physical, the logical and the digital space that we work in. And I think you've also then got an element of just culture that needs to change a little bit. People are still, for some reason, quite concerned about a camera that tracks whether they're looking at the screen or not, or what their mood is, whether they're engaged. And I think with, you know, the millennials coming through and they're just being used to that. They're used to having their whole life on the digital realm anyway. We'll see that become a lot more acceptable. And once that changes, and, you know, we know the appetite's there from a business standpoint because this data is invaluable. But once those sensors just become integrated in all sorts of spaces, from meeting spaces right through to retail, stadiums everywhere, that will just really start to supercycle the effectiveness and the R&D of all the solutions that we deliver.
Yeah, if you can start adding artificial intelligence to data, you can start moving towards smart buildings, and then move the conversation further from just preventative maintenance. And, you know, oh, this is a really nice metric for me to prove return on investment, and actually start focusing on end user outcomes and what they want to do, and how we can enhance and take the user experience to the next level.
Yeah, and it's just learning how to take that data and turn it into business intelligence as well, because, you know, at the end of the day, it's kind of like giving a kid a chainsaw a little bit at the moment. It's extremely powerful, but if you don't know what you're doing with it, you can come a cropper really easily as well.
absolutely. I think, you know, the challenge there is that people get really excited about, oh, we've got data, we've got all this cloud-based technology, we can, you know, we can look at even options with AI. People like Cisco and Google are already doing it in VC, UC environments, starting to. But if you open up those floodgates, you can get yourself into a mess. And going back to what we were originally talking about, probably the key focus for end users is simple, reliable, easy to use systems. So it's really, it's a very fine balancing act at the moment, that you don't go too far too quickly into that area and start to then get back to this old model of overcomplicating systems and potentially making them unreliable because, or unusable because you know, trying to do too much. Automated repair functionality and things like that is stuff people are already asking about. Can we do it? And you can to a point, but you've got to be very careful that if you go too far, then you might cause more problems than you're solving.
And integrators need to be able to develop the right types of partnerships with their customers to really help them leverage that, because you see so many instances over the years where they've gone in and, you know, dropped in a Fusion or an RMS server or something like that, and just sort of left the customer with it, and they're not really AV people. They don't know what to do with that so much. So it's about making sure that we're taking on that responsibility and we're pulling that data out, giving them the intelligence, and having a really good understanding of their business objectives, what their goals are, and how what we're doing actually relates that and you know, pulls it forward.
Yeah, and I think we're also, you know, seeing that if you can have that dedicated AV support system and model, but also tie that as much as possible directly over to the IT support systems, there's usually quite an appetite that they tie together. And that, okay, the IT guys probably don't want to get bogged down with AV issues, but at least they're aware of what those problems are.
Yeah,
and then the AV guys deal with it.
Yeah, they always want to know if we can do a Power BI dashboard now, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
As long as you can pull it into that, life's good.
Yeah.
My final question for today is going to be, if you were to start an integration business today based on the wealth of experience that you've gathered throughout your time in the industry, what would you be doing differently from when you've started, or from what you are currently pursuing in your professional roles?
Hard to answer because I run my own business, so I'm doing what I do. But I think it's really just about the focus on user experience and customer experience, which at the end of the day will drive our success, and making sure that we have a really good understanding and on top of the game when it comes to the developments that have come around, and being able to separate flashpoints from longer term trends and the commoditisation of the more popular technologies that we see.
Yeah, I think, from me coming from the engineering and technical side and seeing a business like ours grow from being one of the few, sort of larger dedicated AV companies right through to now being part of probably the largest global AV company. It's obviously been very successful, but one of the things we have definitely seen is that disruption from IT and UC and software-based systems happen very quickly. And skilling up and getting on top of that side of things has been, I think, a challenge for the whole industry. And I think if anyone who saw that early and started to invest in that side of it early has probably done quite well for that reason, because I think that's been significant.
Yep.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.